morning. I'm gonna jump into this pretty hard here in a second, and I have an exchange with the owner of like an antique shop right at the beginning, which I think threw me off, so I thought I'd start this over. But if you're a patron of mine, make sure you stick around to the end because I've got something a little bit special for you coming up for the 80 and 8. But today we're gonna be talking about cell phones. Last time, I promise, at least for now. It's something that I've always wanted to do because when I was vlogging daily and vlogging just from my phone, which I did for about 800 or so videos straight, I always wondered which was actually the best phone for vlogging because I always ran into problems with any phone that I picked. There were always things that annoyed me about the phones in question, and I just thought, it'd be really cool if I could take them for a test run. I was never big enough for anyone to sponsor me to do it, and I could never afford to buy those phones on my own. And thankfully, thanks to my patrons, I'm able to do that, although I didn't keep them. I returned the 2 losers and got a refund because I can't afford to buy 3 phones still either, but it was a worthwhile risk. And speaking of patrons, today's patron producer is Isabelle Hacot. Hopefully I pronounced the Hacot part right. Thanks for being here, and thanks to all my patrons for making this whole crazy experiment possible. And now, let's talk a little bit about the experience of vlogging with 3 different phones to see which one is the best phone for vlogging. Remember, it's about daily vlogging, not like what is the best phone.
Merci pour d'être ici accueillante. C'est très gentil, merci.
So like this. Time to talk about filming. The owner of this establishment is very nice. She saw me setting up in front of her closed shop, and she brought out some chairs that I'm not going to use because they're a little bit low, but very friendly. It is a fantastically hot Wednesday here in Paris. I'm drinking hot coffee. I don't know why. I said I was going to rate it on 5 things, and those are the 5 things that I'm going to cover in kind of a loose format, but just a reminder, this isn't a video about like which phone to buy as a regular phone. All of these phones that I tested, the Xiaomi Mi 10, the iPhone 11 Pro, and the Samsung Galaxy S20 Plus, are all just one step down. Well, actually the 11 Pro, depending on who you ask, is pretty much as high as it gets at the moment, but all of them are just kind of one level down from their ultimate version, and all of them are good phones. Like if you're gonna buy a phone and use a phone, you're gonna be happy. Especially with the Samsung and the iPhone. I have some problems with the Xiaomi personally, but that we'll get into. This isn't about which one is best as a phone overall. This is about which one would I trust most to be my workhorse in daily vlogging if I were to rely on a phone. Primarily, which is what I did for over 800 videos when I was daily vlogging like every day for 3 years. So, I've used phones a little bit to vlog here and there. Here are the 5 things I'm gonna be rating them on. Overall phone experience rating, so we'll talk about how I feel about them. You've already got a feeling for that. Workflow, stability, perceived video quality, and audio. Those are the 5 things that I said I was gonna talk about way at the beginning when I started testing all 3 phones, and those are the 5 things I'm gonna talk about today. And first, how do I feel about them overall as phones? The Samsung is great, as you would expect. The software with Samsung is always kind of a step down from pure Android. Like I would rather have just straight vanilla Android and none of the additional bloatware that they put in. Their apps and so forth, nothing to write home about. But as a phone overall, it feels nice to use. The screen is beautiful. It looks and feels sleek. I really, really, really liked it. iPhone, same thing. iPhone's beautiful. And their software, of course, is just supreme. Like it's just so nice. And if I lived in the ecosystem, that was one of the major drawbacks in the end. I don't have a Mac. I'm not gonna convert to Apple. So even though I would love to have an Apple Watch, and there's a part of me that wishes that I could convert, it's kind of an expensive conversion and a really sticky one that you can't get back out of. But the iPhone, as far as like overall user experience, is also awesome, really good. There are a couple little things here and there that annoyed me, but that's gonna be true of all the phones. And both the Samsung and the Apple, had their annoyances, especially in like setup and so forth, but in the end, were great experiences and I really enjoyed using them a lot. Apple especially, like the iPhone, I really just wanted to use it more. I just wanted to play with it. They really have the dopamine centers dialed in your brain. They really know what they're doing. The Xiaomi Mi 10, however, kind of took all the most annoying parts of both phones and put them together. Like the way that I had to open the phone, the limitations to how the software worked, the way that they laid out like their apps and the notifications. Notifications is one of the things that iPhone still has not figured out how to do as well as Android, which blows my mind because that's been the case for like a decade, but the Xiaomi managed to screw that up a little bit too. So I really wasn't a fan of the experience of it as a phone. It wasn't terrible. Like you wouldn't hate having one, I don't think, but I like opened it and didn't want to use it. So maybe that's a good thing actually. In a way, if you need to break your habit of using your phones too much, maybe Xiaomi is the way to do that. Just a really expensive way to do that. On that front, I don't actually have like a numbered rating system that I put together, but I would give both the Apple and the Samsung 5 out of 5 and the Xiaomi like a 3.5. I don't know if that's fair or not, but that's kind of how I feel. The most important category though that we need to get into right now is workflow. And I gotta put my mask on so I can find a new location safely. Workflow is absolutely the most important category. By workflow, I mean a lot more than just like when I sit down to edit. I mean, how does it fit into my day overall as I'm using the phone? And then of course, how often do I feel like chucking it out a window? So my workflow is kind of oddly specific because it's been so deeply integrated into just my lifestyle as a whole. So I need to do 3 things consistently. 1, it has to be quick on the draw. Like I have to be able to get out of my pocket and start filming as fast as possible. 2, it has to be reliable and consistent when it produces. And 3, it has to like integrate really well into my edit, because my edit is like, what? Like a quarter of my waking life. As far as quick on the draw goes, the Samsung wins by a long shot. Now, for those of you who are gonna be railing that iPhone is just as fast to open, iPhone is fast to open, don't get me wrong. Like you can open it pretty quickly and swipe. I really like how you can hold the little camera button and it'll pop open. But since it's purely software and there's nothing hardware, when you're pulling it out of your pocket, like on your bicycle or on a wheel, doing something maybe you shouldn't really be doing in the first place, and then getting into it as quickly as you can, having a physical feature to double tap on a button to open your phone makes a massive difference, especially because I often found myself trying to swipe on the screen and not getting it right the first or second time.
Damn it.
And by the time you've screwed up unlocking your phone twice, you still have to get into the video mode if it isn't loading into the video mode on its own to begin with, which it doesn't do consistently. None of them do that consistently. It's not a knock against any of them, but that little fraction of a second can cost you, a nice moving shot that you really wanted to get that you may never be able to get again. Reliability, both the iPhone and the Samsung are super reliable. You can tell this is really a competition between those two already, but those two are super, super reliable in what they produce. The frame rates are pretty much always the same. And one of the things that I didn't realize that I needed until I had it was the ability to switch between lenses while filming. Super good. We'll talk about that some in the video section as well, but the ability to pop between lenses seamlessly without having to stop and start recording was a huge win. And when I got to the Xiaomi and it couldn't do that, it drove me bananas. And on the Xiaomi, it had like a little zoom lever thing that my hand would interact with occasionally, unintentionally. And yeah, no bueno. It was not very reliable on that front. I did have some issues starting and stopping footage with both the iPhone and the Samsung, which just comes with the territory, but it was not as bad with those two. And like I said, neither of them are perfect, and they annoyed me plenty from time to time. And finally, naming conventions. Samsung and Xiaomi, just because they're Android, name their files with the date and timestamp so that you know exactly when you were filming it, which is really nice for organizing everything and never having any duplicates. Whereas the iPhone does it like the IMG underscore and then a number, so it's like image number, which does 2 things. 1, it means that it's possible to have duplicate names for video files if you happen to format things, or if you're using another camera that does the same thing. And the other thing is that it intersperses both video and photos. So you're like video, photo, video, photo, which is really, really annoying when you're trying to get yourself organized and get started, because all I want in there is videos. I don't want the photos to be dumped into my project files. So that was kind of a knock against the iPhone on that front. But another feature that the iPhone did come in right along with Samsung that the Xiaomi did not was that after plugging it into my phone a couple times, those 2 phones, whether it was at the beginning or after a few times, both offered to use my computer as a trusted device, and I didn't have to authorize using it every time after, which was a really consistent annoyance with the Xiaomi, as well as my Pixel 3, which is kind of what I'm basing a lot of this experience off of. My frustrations here are informing a lot of the overall, way that I'm rating all of this. So on workflow, in the end, I would give the Samsung gets a 5 for being so quick on the draw, consistent, and working with my computer really well. The iPhone only gets dinged for being a little bit slower, so it's like a 4.5. And then, the Xiaomi comes in at, again, like a 3.5, because it was so hard to open and get filming, and then swapping between lenses, like I noticed the annoyances like as much as I was filming. Okay, stability. Of course there's a ship going by in the background. Sorry about that. We'll get to audio here shortly. But honestly, stability, they're all passable. Like, they're still phones, they're not on gimbals. It's nothing like my Osmo Pocket. When I'm using my Osmo Pocket, it ruins my concept of stability for everything else. They're all better than my Sony, that's for sure. And as far as, overall stability goes, like, I would give them pretty high markings. When I did live stream with the gimbal, the Xiaomi actually stood out as being pretty shaky. People commented on that a lot. I'm not sure why exactly that was, so I gotta ding it for that. And then I did notice, like, it was just a little bit shakier. And I honestly, I didn't notice enough between the Samsung and the iPhone. I had moments where I noticed both of them being a little bit like, not ideal, but they're way better than the Pixel 3. One of the things that they don't do that the Pixel 3 does in the software stabilization, because if you're unfamiliar, there's a lot of software stabilization going on with the phone's internal stabilizing. It would get stuck on, like, stationary objects as you're moving, things like that, which would end up causing it to look really stupid and shift in the frame. Bonjour. No, allez-y. No, c'est moi. But these guys all did fairly well. Like, there weren't too many artifacts that I ever noticed. There's nothing particularly annoying and nothing really worth talking about too much. So I'm gonna give the Samsung and the iPhone both 5s, and the Xiaomi a 4.5 to be generous, because I think I've been kind of crapping on it a lot, and I don't mean to be crapping on a lot, but you know, I'm just trying to be honest. All right, perceived video quality. I got a lot of notes on this one. I'm just gonna go straight for it because apparently I've been crapping on Xiaomi this whole time anyways, but the fake depth of field that it would do, like especially when I had the camera on me, is something that like kind of it can look really nice in photos. You know how iPhone does that too with their portrait mode, whatever else. They produce kind of this like fake depth of field, which can make everything look just kind of extra nice in a photo. And it might be something that a lot of people actually like in the video as well, but for me it really drove me crazy because it flattened the image to me. Because things that, the farther back you go, like Notre Dame's behind me right now, Notre Dame should look blurrier in a real depth of field than this tree behind me. But in that setting, they all looked equally blurry, which makes everything look just as far away behind you. Yeah, and removes depth. I really did not like that at all, and I didn't see a way that I could change that. iPhone and Samsung, as a lot of people noted, had very different color profiles. I liked them very much, both of them. I really enjoyed opening up the iPhone files, and I really enjoyed opening up the Samsung files. They're both really different, at least to my eye, and I feel like to a lot of people's eyes, and there was a really polarized, you know, opinion as to which one was better. I didn't personally think that either was necessarily better, but I did enjoy them both for what they were. The Xiaomi, again, kind of flat and a little bit cold, and I don't know, just like when I finally did the videos where I was making all three of them next to each other, it stood out, and not in a great way. All of them struggled with HDR though. The HDR settings, when I was on video and I was in a low light situation, you may have noticed that I looked a little bit blown out and orange. Good morning. Oh man, it's already getting warm in here. And being the one non-engineer in the room is always a lot of fun, because you start to notice how wide or not so wide, narrow I guess, pretty sure that was the HDMR feature, not knowing what to do or how to make up for the fact that I was a little bit in the dark. And yeah, they all kind of sucked at that. I will say though, that the Samsung, I did really like how clear the images felt, and the slow-mo, my God. The super slow-mo is somewhere in the 900 frame rate per second. I can put it on the screen because I don't remember what it was. It was insane, and I actually was lucky enough to capture one shot with the iPhone and the Samsung at the same time, and you can see the difference as a bird flies by. That's just the raw speed that they were both captured at, and it looks phenomenal. In comparing the lenses themselves, the telephoto on the Xiaomi was right on par with the iPhone. They were both like X2 is what they call it. I just wasn't really a big fan. It really let me down. I thought this was going to be a brand that, because I didn't know it and it was rated so highly, it was going to come through, and it just felt like it let me down consistently. That said, the iPhone's ultra wide was a 0.5, whereas the Xiaomi's was only a 0.6, and it came through in certain moments, especially when you compared them. There was a shot that I took with both of them when I was comparing them the first time, and I could really see like the entire scene by the river on the iPhone. I could see above the conciergerie, and I could see this car pulling in down below. But with the Xiaomi, I couldn't get all of that. Like I just couldn't get everything happening in the same scene, and that makes a really big difference. This is actually one of the biggest deal breakers for me, because if the telephoto on the iPhone was as long as the Samsung's, which is ×3, that would be kind of a game-changing moment for me, and I would be a lot more tempted to switch over to iPhone than I currently am. Samsung's X3 telephoto lens makes a massive difference. It really looks and feels telephoto. The other two look magnified and feel like telephoto. It's not that they're not telephoto, they definitely are. But when you can get that extra length in for that X3, like holy smokes, it made me so happy. I can't live without it. I love it. I'll never go back. I need it. And Samsung's ultra wide, just as wide as the iPhone's, so it kills on the lens selection. And that's basically it on the perceived video quality. There's a lot of opinion that can rage between like how the different file formats come out and everything else. It was actually a nightmare on the first time I was filming with the iPhone, because I didn't realize it was on its own codec. But once I switched that over to the generic or the compatible codec, it all worked out just fine from there. And I really didn't have any problems using the iPhone footage. So as far as the footage goes, and as far as integrating it into everything that I was doing, generally just fine. And again, for those of you that are Apple fanboys and girls who are dying on the inside that I didn't end up choosing an iPhone, because I'm sure you figured that out by now, it's not because I didn't want to. I did. There are just a couple of little features that are serious, that make a really big difference for me in vlogging. That won't make a difference for you probably in everyday phone usage, so don't worry about it. This is about whether or not to use one for vlogging. And last but not least, audio. The Xiaomi had a surprise ace up its sleeve with audio in that it didn't overprocess it when trying to correct for wind, which is really kind of a toss-up, honestly, between which way you should go. With the Xiaomi, it didn't try hardly at all, if at all, which meant you got a lot of wind noise, which is the #1 sin you can commit in making a video. It made it really nice at certain times where it didn't like duck out at random points and like you'd lose my voice in the left or the right channel. But to me, it was kind of surprisingly refreshing. I kind of liked it, even though it was problematic. With the Samsung and the iPhone, there were definitely a lot of issues in trying to figure out, especially the Samsung actually, it has its microphone, I think like really close to the surface. But honestly, at the end of the day, like it was the only phone that didn't have a case on it because I got the wrong size case, so that could have been solved by that. I may never know. Well, I will know when I get a case for it. Don't worry, I'll get a case for it. The iPhone and the Samsung both held the silky richness of my voice when up close, like we are right now. Great. They all struggle from afar, which is just how microphones work. And I am really sweating. I'm sorry. It is roasting hot out here today. All that to say that, you know, honestly, it's kind of a wash. I think that they all did okay. I'm going to give them all 4.5s. They could definitely be better. Heck, let's give them 4s. Now, 4.5 is fine. They could be better, but for what they are, they're actually pretty phenomenal. And honestly, you know, all in that range of like, you're kind of at that point where you're not going to notice too many problems with them anymore. But there's definitely room for improvement, and it was all synced up. That's another thing. All the audio was perfectly synced up, which is another problem that I've had with other phones. At least so far, these guys are all good. But that basically brings us to a close. I mean, really, as you can tell, I could have put a lot more time into the actual quantifying of like the information, but it seems like such a subjective thing at the end of the day. You can go look at the stats for all these phones. You can see which ones have technically the best cameras, which ones, you know, on and on, that kind of information's out there. But for me, it was a lot more about the actual experience of using the phones on a daily basis and thinking like, which one of these would I actually want to have in my pocket and trust to come through for me in those moments where like I need a phone. Because you know, as they say, the best camera is the one you have on you. And if you always have a phone on you, you want to make sure that that's at least a decent camera. The cool thing about these is, especially with the multi-lenses, I'm so stuck on the multiple lens array, I almost don't need any other camera. And that's how comfortable and confident it makes me feel to have one of these phones, because the functionality of having the ultra wide and the telephoto combined into a phone, it's a great backup, phenomenal backup. For stability and for image quality overall, I think the Osmo Pocket is still ahead. For like image quality and characterization, depth of field, a number of different elements, my Sony is still way ahead, like having an actual mirrorless camera. This guy's not far enough behind, and I think it fits really well into the overall array of cameras that I will have in my bag or my pocket at any given time. At the end of the day, I would have been happy, and I still kind of like, I thought about this, if the iPhone 12 comes out and it has a 3x telephoto lens, that would be potentially enough to make me give it a second look, because I really, really enjoyed using it a lot, just as a phone. There's a part of me that wants to fall into the Apple camp. I'm not gonna lie, I would really like to. But for the existing setup that I have, for the lifestyle that I lead, and for everything that's going on, the Samsung hits everything right on the head for me, or as close to on the head as it can. And again, no, there's no perfect phone, and this thing is gonna fail me eventually as well. But in the meantime, genuinely really happy with it. I really enjoy just carrying it around and filming with it, and I am so glad that I got to have this experience. Thanks again to my patrons for making it possible in the first place. Thanks to Amazon for accepting all of my returns, because that made all the difference in the world. It was a very expensive and risky venture, but it paid off in the end, and I got all that money back, so that helps. Thanks to everybody for watching. Thanks for tuning in. Tomorrow will just be a regular old bump it around Paris vlog, and I did say that at the end I was gonna have something for my patrons. If you haven't noticed already, hop on over to Patreon. You can become a patron right now and get in on this as well if you want, but I made quarter maps. So I took my old arrondissement map of Paris, so it has all the arrondissements of the city, really nicely delineated, and then I carved it up into the quarters as well, so that as I do the 80 and 8, you can download it, print it off, and follow along as you will. At some point, maybe we'll make a poster or something out of it that you can buy. But for patrons at home, if you want to follow along, just print out the map. You can color it in, you can write the names in, you can take notes and put down things that you want to visit in each one as I go. I just thought it'd be really fun to have a visual way of following along as I go, and so I wanted, and I really like my map. It's a little bit like hand-drawn, so it's not necessarily the most exact map that you'll ever have of Paris, but I think it's pretty close. It's good, I think it's stylish, and yeah, if you want to grab one of those, hop on over to Patreon. For all my patrons, it's going to be available to, you know, print as many times as you want and do with as you will. So in the meantime, I'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning for, you know, yet more Paris, hopefully at least a little bit cooler here, and maybe we'll get into autumn eventually. See you then.